All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Advocates LSU Sports Update. I'm Wilson Alexander, football beat writer, joined today by our columnist, Scott Rabelais. We have two shows for y'all this week as LSU gets ready to play Georgia in the SEC Championship. We'll be back here again on Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. To really dive into the nitty-gritty sort of football of the game. But Rab's going to join me here today to think back over what we saw at Texas A&M. Maybe not something a lot of people want to relive, but certainly something we have to go over, and then kind of start to talk about the matchup. Rab, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and for all you folks out there, Wilson is playing a little hurt right now. He's not feeling super great, but hopefully he'll be on the mend and is probable for Saturday's game against Georgia.
Well, if Harold Perkins can play with the flu, then I'm sure I can play through whatever I'm dealing with. So we'll push through we'll start unless if anybody has any questions or comments or anything that they want Rab and I to answer, please drop them in here and we'll get to them as we're going. We're going to start with just a couple quick updates from Brian Kelly today. We had press conference with him. We also spoke to him last night on a teleconference. A few injury things to know. Starting quarterback Jark Bernard-Converse, who missed the Texas A&M game with a concussion, he will go through practice non-contact tomorrow. If all goes well there, he'll get cleared and put him on track to return for the SEC Championship. Obviously, having a starting corner will be a big help. LSU moved Jay Ward out to the boundary for Texas A&M, and while he seemed to hold his own, you want to have all be at full strength. And so that's the latest with Jarek. Jaden Daniels, no new updates since last night on Jaden. Really, he'll be in the boot again today for his injured ankle. That's a right ankle that he was grabbing at Texas A&M and had that taped up and went back in the game. But he is going to have to do another little sort of minor test tomorrow. Brian Kelly basically described it as lifting up off of your toes and to test his ankle strength. And if that's all good, then he will practice Tuesday. And then they'll kind of continue to see his status throughout the week. But it seems to be turning in a decent direction. And then same thing with Josh Williams, also trending in a positive direction. Brian Kelly said more definitively today that he will be available. Williams himself sounded a little bit more maybe cautious with it, but also said that he feels confident that he'll be playing in the game. So that was some of what we learned today from Brian Kelly. But let's start by going into this Texas A&M game. Obviously, Rab and I were both there over in College Station, and LSU lost 38-23. They came out rather flat. There was kind of a lot of issues. Rab, what were your basic impressions of what went wrong for LSU in this game and why they may have struggled against the Aggies?
Basically, as so often in football, it comes down to they didn't control the line of scrimmage. They didn't get enough pressure on the Texas A&M quarterback, Wegman, and allowed Texas A&M to open a lot of holes for A-Chain, Devin A-Chain, their running back, and he's tremendous if he's healthy enough, and he was. And then on offense, they just didn't do enough. They didn't put Jaden Daniels on his backside as many times as say Arkansas did, but it was a issue of just not finding enough running holes and not giving him enough time to throw, and he had to take off and run probably more than he wanted to. And I thought he was pretty brave. He got injured twice in the game and kept coming back. So, and it just look, this is an up and down LSU team as we've seen throughout the course of the season. And the 3 losses, you can all say, but they didn't play very well. And at least 2 of them, you think they could have won if they had played better, Florida State and Texas A&M. And then they once pulled out some close ones. They ended up going 3-1 on the road in SEC play, which is not bad. I think you look at the whole season, as I'm sure we'll discuss, it's very good overall. But Saturday is just one of those games that this team can have, and it was just kind of a clunker, and they didn't play well. And it's not surprising when this happens. I think it's the surprising part is how well they've done over the course of the year. But those were the basic things. I thought just the little mistakes. Drop passes again were issues. A couple of little special teams issues again. Just all added up. And of course, the turnover, the scoop and score when Jaden fumbled, and you lost the turnover battle. 1-0. World Cup reference there. So that all adds up to getting beat on the road in the SEC, even against a team that struggled all year like A&M.
Yeah, let's go into something you sort of mentioned there, because I think Brian Kelly has been pretty frank about this the last 2 days, just how much LSU has maximized what it has. I mean, what do you sort of just make of what this coaching staff has done with this team, and I guess how much have they maximized the talent that's on this roster, and I guess how vulnerable really are they? I think maybe we've all sort of, I don't know, necessarily forgotten about the fact that this is a roster that is talented at the top, but doesn't have a lot of depth, and isn't built up over years and years of top recruiting classes like Georgia, which we'll get into later. How much has this staff sort of maximized what they have?
I think very much so. I mean, Kelly was talking today about how the running back depth is not what they want. Having lost Armani Goodwin, and is Josh Williams going to play? He sounded optimistic when we talked to him this afternoon on the SEC teleconference, but didn't say definitively that he would play against Georgia. You're playing the two freshmen at offensive tackle. That's an issue. Having to piece together a secondary, try to develop chemistry in the passing game between the new quarterback and receivers he hadn't been with last year. It's all that, and they've done a remarkably good job to get this team to this point. And I think it's attention to detail, it's consistency of message. One of Brian's most interesting quotes today, when he said, "We don't give the players curveballs. They come every day when they come to the football facility, they know what they're going to get." And he's provided that structure and that attention to detail that I think has really benefited LSU this year. And it's a reason that they're where they are. He's a very good coach, not a miracle worker. People are going to say, well, Lincoln Riley has got USC probably going to the playoff this year, and LSU is not going to make it. Well, yeah, it's tough. I think LSU was coming from farther back in the horse race than the Trojans were. So they've had a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to do. The transfer portal opens up again next week, and as you wrote the other day, it's going to be a free-for-all, and LSU needs to win some of those battles for next year because they still have some holes to fill on this roster that they didn't have time to fill this year. So, but overall, you have to be encouraged by the trajectory of the program. A loss like Saturday's game against Texas A&M aside.
Yeah, in that loss, LSU struggled so much in the run defense, like you mentioned, just was not able to control the line of scrimmage. Devon Achane rushed for 215 yards on 38 carries, and that was probably the most concerning thing to come out of that, because Georgia is a team that wants to be physical, and particularly over the last 2 weeks has reestablished itself on the ground. The Bulldogs have rushed for more than 40 times for over 200 yards in both of the last two games against Kentucky and Georgia Tech. And so where's your love? Are you concerned with the run defense after maybe just one game? Or do you feel like, okay, we're looking at the all-encompassing of a season. They've been pretty stout against the run by and large. Or do you think that all of a sudden there's maybe reason to worry that LSU is going to struggle in that department against Georgia?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. I mean, Texas A&M's offensive line had struggled all year, and but they got a good push, and just that's why they were so good on third down. They were 10 or 15 on third down, and a lot of those were third and shorts. 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. They had those over and over again. It's definitely a concern, but LSU has done a very good job against some very good running backs this year. The running back from UAB, his name escapes me at the moment. Yeah, I don't think the Alabama running backs hurt them too terribly badly, in that game, although it was obviously a opposite back and forth kind of game. Some others. So I think they can do better. Like we tend to think of a college football season as just this linear progression one way or another. Well, this is what they just did, so they're going to continue to do that. They might bounce back and play a much better game. Harold Perkins and B.J. Ojolari and Mekhi Wingo, those guys might all be much more disruptive in this game in pressuring Stetson Bennett and getting to the Georgia running backs than they showed in this past game. But that said, Georgia is a different team from, say, Tennessee. Obviously, it was just so explosive. They're just relentless. They just keep coming at you and coming at you with defensive pressure. They come at you with the running game. They have 3 running backs that have over 400 yards rushing this year, looking at their stats. And Stetson can run a little bit as well. Yeah, he's rushed for 7 touchdowns this year on 45 total carries, including sacks. And they got the complementary passing game with a guy like Brock Bowers, their tight end. So they just come at you relentlessly, and that's a lot for LSU's defense to put up with. But it's they've had similar challenges in the past, and I think that they could. I'm not saying they definitely will, but they could bounce back and give a good accounting of themselves and limit Georgia, which we've seen at times to be kind of a little clunky on offense at times this year.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Baskerville said today, we feel they're going to come out and run it on us because of last week. That's our challenge that we're going to have to stop so it doesn't happen back-to-back weeks. So it seems like LSU is going to be really focused on shoring up the run defense. I do have faith in Matt House to be able to come up with a plan and at least make this hard on Georgia, because he's done that most throughout the season. Matt was not selected as a finalist for the Broyles Award, which the 5 of those came out today, but he was a semifinalist for good reason. And so I feel like they'll be better on the defensive side. But like you said, Georgia is relentless on the offensive side. Like you said, it wasn't necessarily the reason LSU lost this game, but LSU just wasn't able to really finish drives against Texas A&M. They had a few, that were still 70 yards, but this is an offense that it really sort of clicked into, I guess, my mind after watching that Texas A&M game, just how it's not an explosive group. And I looked it up yesterday doing my film review. LSU ranks in the bottom half of the country in plays over 20, 30, 40, and 50 yards. How much of a problem could that be against a Georgia defense that is as talented as it is, despite losing 5 first-round draft picks all on the defensive side last year, that has done a really good job as, number 1 in SP plus, which is an opponent adjusted metric for efficiency, and number 1 in or higher in a lot, or even not higher, but like top 5 in a lot of different categories. Without being able to really take the top off a defense and have explosive plays that aren't just Jaden Daniels running the ball, how much of a problem could that be? Or do you feel more confident in LSU's offense and the ability to move the ball against the Bulldogs?
Well, again, I think it's an issue, because if you can't hit a lot of explosive plays, then you have to count on long sustained drives. And I think that's going to be an issue against Georgia. I think they'd be better off, obviously, if they were more of a quick strike team. It's like, okay, we don't have to drive the ball 12 plays or 15 plays to get a score. They can just score in 2 or 3 plays, boom, boom, and they're in the end zone or down in the red zone. So yeah, I think it's definitely an issue for LSU having to try to sustain things. I just, I didn't really see the Georgia Tech game. We were in the car driving to College Station, but I remember the Kentucky game, and Kentucky just kept dying in the red zone. They just couldn't complete those drives, and LSU is going to have to find a way to do that, and it's not going to be very easy against this defense, which is that's the story of Georgia's season to me. It's like, they, as you said, lost all these players on defense, and then they come back and they're so suffocating once again on defense. And it's hard to be good year in, year out on defense in college football these days, with so much predicated on offense, and offense, having the upper hand for the most part. They're kind of that old school program. They don't go for all the flashiness, and like Tennessee. We'll give up some points, but we're going to score more. So let's go score again. Yeah, Georgia's not that way. And I guess, you can say that because Kirby Smart is a defensive coach by nature. But yeah, that's going to be difficult for LSU to go down the field and drive. And it's a huge challenge. I mean, to me, that's the game there, because I don't think they're going to give up 38 points to Georgia. I just don't feel that way. Even though they're coming off the same game, what they did, one of those being a defensive touchdown, of course. I think they have a good chance to keep Georgia in the below 30, but can they score with and win a game 28-26 or 31-28? That's the big question, and I'm not that confident that LSU's going to be able to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned Georgia real quick. They have the number 1 red zone defense in the country, both in terms of just percentage scores and touchdown percentage allowed. LSU is going to have to find a way to finish off those drives. LSU, it's interesting because it wants to kind of get to the place where Georgia's at in terms of physicality. Brian Kelly, that's what they want to do on offense. They want to be physical. They want to run the ball. They want to win at the point of the attack and then set up things off of that. I think they've gotten pretty creative this year just because of what they have, in Jaden Daniels, and, using his legs and building off of that. But they want to get to a point where maybe it doesn't look the same, but in terms of overall philosophy, have that physicality. But when you're trying to go physical against physical, you've got to have the talent and the depth to do that. And while, again, LSU, I think, has sort of, as we said earlier, maximized its talent in a lot of ways this year, it doesn't have 5 or 6 straight number one recruiting classes stocked up on top of each other yet, just because Kelly and all them just got here, and it looks like their things are shaping up well on the recruiting trail. But they got to do that for a few years just to get to the roster to a point where it's neck and neck and at the same level as a Georgia. But all that aside, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to go a little bit deeper into this, especially because you've covered the SEC championship game for years. You've seen this LSU team obviously for a very long time. This is the second time. It feels like the Texas A&M loss sort of took some of the juice out of the fact that LSU made it to the SEC championship game. But they're in the SEC championship game a year after being 5-6. Tomorrow's actually the 1-year anniversary of LSU hiring Brian Kelly. A year ago today, they were 5-5. Ed Orgeron coached his last game. They were going to go into a bowl. 6-6, not 5-5. They were 5-5.
6 and lost the bowl. Yeah,
right. 5-5 the year before that, of course. So just two mediocre years. The fact that they've done this in year one, what's the significance of that for this program in your mind?
Well, it's like I said, they've had some highs and lows that show that they've not arrived, as Kelly candidly continues to say, but they've gotten to to win the West. And you can say, well, A&M was down and Auburn was down and Arkansas wasn't what they were last year and Alabama's not good, but you still got to win the games. You still have to go there and beat SEC competition. And they won 6 out of 8, and then that's pretty impressive. They don't always win the league, and in years going forward, what they did wouldn't get them in the championship game, and we can touch on that if you want later, Wilson. But it's tremendously impressive that they got here. They were picked 5th in the SEC West before the season. No one gave them a chance. Not one first place vote at SEC Media Days from all of us who were covering Media Days in Atlanta. Not one, and rightly so. I mean, I don't think anyone expected that, I asked kind of Brian Kelly about that. He didn't exactly answer the question the way I asked it, but I said, what would you have thought of this team looking on the outside and their chances to be in this situation in a championship game? And he didn't exactly answer, but he did say they've fought and they've bought into what he's asked them to do. Like I said, he's given them a consistent message and structure. And that is, and you've heard players saying, hey, they lost to Texas A&M, but they're still trusting the process that they've been in, and that has evolved over the course of this season to where that has really carried them through, and it's tremendously impressive. Again, it's not a linear progression. People can say, well, they won the West this year, next year they should be even better. Well, that may or may not be true. But it's been easier to bounce back from these last 2 years where they were combined 11 and 12 because of the transfer portal. I don't think in years past they would have been able to do this quite so easily, but it's worked to their advantage, and might not always, but this year it did. So it's a heck of an achievement, and people need to. I kind of feel like I'm always, a lot of columnists are like banging the table, like, this is terrible, this is that. I feel like I'm often trying to be the voice of reason covering LSU and say, look, people need to have a little perspective and say 9-3. You would have taken this season in a heartbeat going into the year. They're 9-3, and they're going to beat Alabama, and they're going to go to the SEC championship game. Any LSU fan would have taken that in a second. And it just now, is it a little tarnished by the Texas A&M loss? Sure. It's embarrassing to lose to a team that was 1-6 in conference. But this team was bound to have some days like that. And they won most of the ones like that, the close games against a struggling Auburn team, against an Arkansas team that's been pretty middling this year. But they usually got the job done. This past Saturday they didn't, but maybe next Saturday will be different. Who knows?
Well, I for one appreciate your voice of being the voice of reason when everything seems like it's distraught. Maybe we sort of touched on a lot of different things within there, but what has sort of maybe impressed you about this team throughout the season, and maybe gives you a feeling like, okay, if they do these little things well, they can go and win an SEC title this weekend?
Well, they can be pretty disruptive on defense. They can really get some pressure. Harold Perkins, B.J. Ojolari, Baskerville, Jacolin Roy right up the middle. I've liked that. Again, it didn't go very well against A&M, but that they're getting pressure right up the middle. I think they really affected Bryce Young, and I think they can affect Stetson Bennett in that regard. And then, of course, the dual threat, the running backs run really hard, and of course the dual threat of Jaden Daniels. Now, he's got the ankle injury. Is he going to be able to run as much as usual? He's their leading rusher, right, for the course of the season. Is he going to be able to do that again? I don't know. I'm thinking it's a chance he won't be quite in that mode this year. But heck, he's got a chance to be a 1,000-yard rusher when you include the stats from this game and from the bowl game. That's pretty impressive. I don't think it's ever happened for an LSU quarterback. So that is always that speed. I think Kirby Smart said on the teleconference yesterday, right? He's got speed and quickness, right? Which is, he said those are two different factors. It sounds like the same thing, but it's true. He can just take off and he can beat you to the corner. And he's done that against some of the fastest defensive players in the conference. Now, can he do that this weekend? They're gonna have to do some little voodoo, ceremony over his ankle probably to get him to that extent for this game. But there's a chance, and of course he gives you that dimension. So I think that's been one of the most impressive things that he's been as durable too. Has been impressive to me. I remember writing the preseason, looking at him. We interviewed him for the first time. He looks so thin. He's gonna get broken in half in the SEC, and he's had some injuries. He's come out of a couple of games, but he's kept fighting back, and I think he'll fight back this season. But just he's typified the grit and resilience of this team this year that makes you say, this is long odds against Georgia, but you don't want to completely count them out. You don't want to completely say that they have no chance, because as good as Georgia is, I don't think they're infallible, and I don't think LSU is as bad as they looked Saturday against Texas A&M.
Yeah, Georgia seems to have this tendency sometimes this year to kind of not play up to its absolute best and kind of wallow or, kind of around a little bit and or just not be able to completely overtake a game like it did last year where Georgia just dominated everybody it played. It almost lost to Missouri on the road, and Kentucky made it interesting at the very end because Georgia, had a chance to, went for it on 4th and 1 at the goal line. When it was up 16-0, didn't get it. Kentucky turns around and scores and makes that kind of an interesting fourth quarter. So there is I think maybe a path for LSU to keep this game close, and then maybe you go and you win it in the fourth quarter, kind of like they did against Alabama. But like I said, we're going to dive into the sort of, Lee and I will kind of get more into the nitty gritty of the matchup on Wednesday. I'll kind of go ahead and tell people, you mentioned why this won't be the case moving forward. When the SEC changes its model. I think that's something that people will come to realize in a few years, but go ahead and tell them what's going on and why in the new SEC scheduling model that's being discussed, LSU actually wouldn't be playing in this game.
Yeah, when Texas and Oklahoma joined the league, probably in 2025, though it's still a chance I guess it could happen for 2024, divisional play is going away. That's one thing they've decided with the new schedule format. They haven't announced whether it's going to stay with 8 conference games. Are they going to go to 9? I think most people expect them to go to 9 with 3 permanent opponents and 6 rotating opponents. But so how are you going to determine the SEC championship game? It's going to be obviously, record. If somebody goes through 8-0 like Georgia, well, Georgia would be in, obviously. But LSU and Tennessee and Alabama, they'd all be out there with 6-2 records, and who would get to go. It's going to be based on a tiebreaker formula that would not favor LSU. At this point, it'd be head-to-head matchups, and they might go with rankings and stuff like that. So this LSU would not be in the game. They probably would be like they are going to be in the rankings when the CFP rankings come out. They'll probably be 4th. And so, but you play the game the way the rules are set up right now. I'm not saying it diminishes what LSU is doing because it's the way it's set up this year. But in the future, you could have. It could be like a Georgia-Tennessee. I think we figured it could well be a Georgia-Tennessee SEC championship game if those rules were in place this year. It's not, and it won't be for another couple of years, but it is coming, and it's going to be different. And it's going to be torturous. I think some of the tiebreakers, and they have to figure out not only the SEC, but tiebreakers are going. Division play is going to win other conferences as well. It's going to be very difficult for people to comprehend. So that's why you got us. You just read what we're writing, and we'll steer you right and help you figure out what's going on. But that's going to be very different. The SEC's done this for 30 years. I mean, they've had divisional play for 30 years since the first SEC championship game, which I covered back in 1992.
Yeah. Well, I think you've sort of given some of what you feel about this game away already, but maybe not asking for a score yet. I'll let you save your score prediction for our goes up online on Thursday mornings and then in print. I'll let you think about that for a few more days. But I guess what's your early guess at what happens in this game Saturday?
Well, you have to pick Georgia to win. Obviously, the better team, the more experienced team. They've been there. They've won. Is it 30 of their last 31 games? Or what are they? What kind of a role are they on at this point, Wilson? Do you know?
It's something right around there.
Yeah, but the only loss was in last year's SEC championship game, right?
Yeah,
to Alabama.
Against Alabama, they've won now though 2 straight. They have got 2 straight undefeated regular seasons, and they have also they're the 3rd SEC team and the first since Florida in 08-09 to complete back-to-back undefeated SEC.
That's remarkable. You have to go with Georgia. It is college football, though. It is highly unpredictable, and just what happened last week doesn't mean what's going to happen this week will follow suit. I think LSU, as we like to say, has a puncher's chance in this game, and Georgia's going to have to really walk into one for LSU to win. But I go back a long way with the SEC championship game, and this feels very much like the 2001 championship game between LSU and Tennessee. The Vols came in number 2, and LSU won 31-20. And they knocked LSU starting quarterback Rohan Davey out of the game. He went to the hospital, with a spleen injury, I believe. So anything can happen once you get in the game, but you have to favor Georgia. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking like, well, they're going to lose. They're going to cover or not. I think that's what a lot of people will be thinking in this game. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to save my thoughts on the game for our show on Wednesday. Scott, thank you so much for joining me here. Everybody, thank you for watching. We're going to have coverage of the SEC, of the SEC championship live from Atlanta on Saturday. We're going to get y'all taken care of all week over on the advocate.com and NOLA.com. Lots of stories in the works that'll be going up over the next 5 days or so as we take you up to kickoff at 3 p.m. Central Time from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, LSU and Georgia for the SEC title. Join us, like I said, again here on Wednesday afternoon. Subscribe to our newsletter, which Rab produces a good bit, and like and subscribe at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you again on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day.